The show is, you need to be dedicated. There's so many characters, there are so many houses, there's so many branches, there are so many plot twists. This actually it comes in quite useful. I use this because it tells me who's who exactly. Sometimes I need to refer to it. I have this tattooed on my low back.
That's good, that's good.
Worst place to tattoo it. Anyway, now I've heard, so it's one thing if you're watching this show and you need to keep it straight. Do you ever have trouble keeping it all straight? As the guy who's writing this.
Occasionally, yes. Yes, I have a guy in Sweden that I call, not one of Alexander's nude polar bear writers, but he's actually an American fan, Elio Garcia. He lives in Sweden with Linda Antonsen, and they run the Westeros website, and they actually know the world better than I do. So occasionally when I'm stuck on something, I call up Elio and say, what color eyes did this guy have? Or, was that his nephew or his cousin? And he has it all at the tip
And he
of
can
his
tell you.
fingertips.
He can tell you right away
That's
because you've
right, yes.
made mistakes that these fans have caught. Isn't that right? Over the course of all the books, there's some inconsistencies.
I do. I'm terrible with eye color. I had people had blue eyes, and then they had green eyes in the later book, and the fans, of course, noticed this, and they write me. I get tons of letters. Wait a minute, his eyes changed color. And I have a horse that changed sex between the first book and the second book.
Wow.
I'm not good with horse
That
sex.
happens. It's legal.
Crazy stuff happens in Westeros.
You are writing now book 6 out of 7. Is that correct?
The Winds of Winter, yes.
Okay.
Book 6, and 1,500-page gigantic monster like the last one.
Do you know how it all ends, or is it still up in the air?
No, I know how it all ends.
Get him, boys.
In broad strokes, I know how it all ends. I discover a certain amount of it as it goes. Of course, there's no guaranteeing that the show will end the same way. I mean, David Benioff and Dan Weiss, the showrunners who script the show, have been known to make changes, including in the Red Wedding. You know, I already had a scene that many people considered extremely brutal and as bad as anything, and they turned it up to 11 by including even more deaths than I had in the books. So there are at least 4 characters who are dead in the TV show who are alive in the books still. So hopefully it'll end the same way in the TV show as it does in the books, but we'll see. Meanwhile, I'm writing very fast because my great fear is that David and Dan will catch up with me.
Right. I would think they're getting closer and closer where they're going to need the new material.
It took me like 6 years to do the last book, and they do a season a year, so they're moving like a freight train.
You know, I have to ask you, the biggest surprise to me about all of this is you have this fantastic imagination. You've created this exotic, multi-dimensional world. And just watching the show at first, I thought, this writer, George R.R. Martin, he must be from, a small island off Norway. I'm just imagining you coming from this completely other world, and you're from Bayonne, New Jersey.
Bayonne, New Jersey. That's right.
And what about growing up in Bayonne, New Jersey brought you to this world? Was there anything about your childhood?
It was imagination. It was, I come from a blue-collar family. My father was a longshoreman. We lived in the projects on First Street in Bayonne. Mm-hmm. Which has a deep water channel in front of it. The Kilvan Call connects New York Bay and Newark Bay, and Staten Island across the way. But we didn't have much money. We didn't even own a car. We never went anywhere. My world was 5 blocks long. I went to school on 5th Street. I lived on First Street. I hardly ever got beyond those 5 blocks, except in my imagination. I read comic books, I read books, I watched television and film, and I would sit in my living room windows looking out at the big ships going up and down the Kilvan Cove with all the flags of the different countries of the world and the lights of Staten Island across the way where we never even went, and wondering what exotic mysteries and wonders lurked on Staten Island. And would I ever see them?
Westeros is your concept of what Staten Island is like? That's fantastic.
I did finally get to Staten Island, and I have to say it was kind of disappointing.